Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting. We've been in this campaign for a very long time now, even though it's only been 7 months, so much has evolved and changed. And an opportunity to speak like this is definitely better than the rapid fire forums that we've often been a part of. And your group has done so much locally and beyond in order to organize folks, particularly in resistance to so many of the Trump policies that have come down. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, we can just start out with some basic standard questions. What motivated you to run, and what sets you apart from the other progressive and grassroots candidates?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Um, Last year, this time, I was not considering a run for Congress. In fact, I'm not interested in being a politician. I see this as an opportunity for public service. But soon after the awful budget bill was passed that stripped 17 million people of their health insurance, I was working in a shift in the emergency department. Um, at the University of Chicago, which is the busiest trauma center in the state, on a typical Wednesday evening, we will be full. There will be people on gurneys in the hallway. Each chair will be full. People who are waiting for mental health beds are often in our emergency department for 72 hours waiting for a bed. One finally came open, and the charge nurse grabbed me and was like, "Let's go out in the waiting room and identify who our next patient should be." So we go through the chart, we go out in the waiting room, and there is a young woman who is in her first trimester and bleeding. There is an older gentleman with on chemotherapy who has a fever. There's an older woman with chest pain, and they all need to be next. But what we have is a system that makes it impossible for physicians to satisfy their fiduciary duties for the to train to practice what they've trained. We've made it impossible for people to live their daily lives without being penalized for poverty, for being hurt at work, for having they simply don't have the resources that they need to thrive. And I realized after that shift, I couldn't sleep. And it was clear to me that I recognize there's a certain amount of human suffering in our existence. That's just part of what I see on a day-to-day basis, but I couldn't tolerate it when we're actually actively making things worse, intentionally harming people, taking away the resources that folks need to thrive, ensuring that inequity expands. Um, and what I was taught in the many years of my time. I come from a Black middle class family that sees itself as a part of this unbroken chain since people were held in bondage, that you stand up for yourself and for each other, particularly when these are things are challenged. And so I have this experience working in the Obama administration. I've worked trying to make the system better for the entirety of my professional career. And it was time for me to do more. What differentiates me from the rest of the field, and I think we actually have a very interesting field, people have a lot of choices, um, is a couple of things. One is I have the moral clarity that comes from being at the bedside on the days that define people's lives. I know what is at stake, and I will never compromise our humanity and recognize that our budgets and the policies that we create are moral documents. Secondly, this is a healthcare election, and I'm the only one in the race that is able on day one to lead in Congress on creating healthcare that honors one another, that protects us when we're vulnerable. That to me means Medicare for all. It also means stopping some of the bleeding that is happening with the cuts to Medicaid and Affordable Care Act subsidies. It also means that I understand all of the policy inputs that actually shape our bodies. The reason there's a 20-year life expectancy gap is not healthcare. That's where we live, learn, work, and play. That is ensuring that we are able to do many of the things that allow for us to flourish over the long term. And I have experience across sectors that allow for me to understand and act immediately. Um, yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's great. That's very helpful. Um, it's sort of,
Mara, this is
yes,
Eric. I need to jump
hi,
in quick.
go ahead.
One, we do have a follow-up question, but two, I needed to mention we're recording. So I started recording and I got the live stream to our YouTube channel down first. So those two things are happening. I need to mention that just so, if people don't want their camera on, etc. Right, that is there. And we do have a follow-up that somebody wanted me to get to you. So I am going to paste that in, and I'm going to let you do with that what you will. I
Yep,
apologize. Now we won't have too many of this interruption, so I'm out
got it.
bouncing.
Thanks, Eric. So you speak about morality a bit in speeches. I am also an ER doctor and believe it's critical to speak up for vulnerable populations. Do you believe Israel's war in Gaza is a genocide? If so, when will you go public about that opinion?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do believe that it is a genocide. I think that, first of all, the term is a legal term, one that'll be adjudicated in the court of law. It is already being pursued in international courts. And I think more importantly, in some ways, because it's a legal term, it is inflammatory and used to divide. And it obscures a lot of what's actually happening on the ground. I've trained a number of doctors who have worked in the hospitals in Gaza, who have shared with me their experiences of taking care of people who have been starved, whose wounds won't heal because they've been malnourished because of the blockade, who have had burns that were unable to be treated because they didn't have the medications that were required, that they worked in tents because the hospitals they worked in were bombed. There is, the Amnesty International report is convincing to me. And so I believe that it is a genocide. There is a WBEZ report that has surveyed all of the candidates, and you will see my clarifying responses there. I am committed to our shared humanity and recognize that a baby in Streeterville and a baby in Inglewood have the exact same value, just as a baby in Gaza and one in Tel Aviv does. And the role of the role of America is to ensure that we create a just and lasting peace. And the first word there is just. We need justice first.
Thank you. Um, I have just a follow-up question to that. Do you accept campaign funds from pro-Israel lobbies?
I don't.
And will you support Delia Ramirez's Block the Bombs Act?
I will.
Okay. And will you vote to stop US aid to Israel, a country that already has universal health care?
Country that has universal health care. Um, my interest in Israel's military support is a function of American policy. I think that security assistance should follow international laws and American laws around humanitarianism. I think that whether it is Israel or Saudi Arabia or Ukraine, where we're sending a lot of funds, they should follow both the Leahy laws and the Foreign Assistance Act, both of which provide military assistance consistent with those laws. And if those laws are being followed, and I don't think that we've had any clarity that they are, then military assistance can flow. And if those laws are not being followed, then they should not. We don't need to make any new laws around that. Those laws are on the books. They just need to be enforced.
Okay, thank you. I will move on to our next question. The seventh district contains some of the widest health and wealth and health disparities in the country, from the Gold Coast to West Garfield Park. How does your platform specifically bridge that gap? And what are a few day one federal priorities that you believe would have the most immediate impact for the seventh district
That is kind of a
specifically?
very complicated and multifactorial question. And
Mhm.
so there are a few things that I think matter first. First of all, the life expectancy gap that is not about healthcare, right? one of the main factors that is hindering people's ability to get ahead, to flourish, are costs of living, right? Day one is both a step that we can take immediately that will have an immediate impact in people's lives, is to regain control of tariff policies. Many of the expansion of costs in this district have to do with tariffs that are driving up prices and trickling into the lives of everyday people. And that's something that we can tackle relatively, well, not relatively quickly. We haven't seen Congress particularly effective in that way, but that will have effect immediately. That also can lead to the kinds of policies that ensure that profiteering around corporations that they may use when there are um, supply chain issues like tariffs do not turn into shrinkflation or further inflationary policies that harm people in their pocketbook on day one. The next is medical bills are the number one reason for bankruptcy, and an incredible pressure that make it very difficult for people to get ahead, particularly in areas like West Garfield Park and Inglewood, where people are already spending 60% of their income on rent. When that happens, an unexpected bill like a car repair or a medical bill, it mean the collapse of their economic present and future. That means, one, stopping the bleeding by returning the funds to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act and driving towards a universal coverage plan like Medicare for All. And the third is other things that you can do that create more long-term financial stability in life. So, for example, we need to start building more homes on the west and south sides in order to drive down housing prices. There's the Yes in My Backyard Act that can be supported, expanding the low income housing tax credit to ensure that instead of pegging it at an average median income of 50 to 60%, you could lower it to 30% so that more people can get into homes. Also making sure that the time frame that people are in, that they are affordable, isn't 15 years, but the entire lifetime of those buildings. The federal child care development block grant program needs to be better funded to ensure that people have child care so that they can get back to work, so that they aren't choosing between their capacity to monitor and support their kids and getting to work. And then I think a third issue is, and I'm hearing this from people across the district, is transportation is really, really difficult. We just lost $2.1 billion in funding for the Red Line expansion. And when you talk to people anywhere west of the medical district on the Blue Line, they all talk about service delays and the inability to use CTA to get downtown to jobs, to their medical appointments. Those are the things that federal government ought to be doing to support local infrastructure in ways that improve people's lives. And we need to get people out of cars. It reduces tailpipe emissions. It improves development in those areas. I would love to drive towards those, restore the grant that was already proposed and in the pipeline, but ensure that the West Side gets a similar opportunity.
All right. You served as a White House fellow in the Obama administration during the ACA rollout. What was one mistake during that implementation that you would avoid if you were writing a new healthcare bill today?
There are a few. Let me give you at least two. First of all, we didn't do anything to protect women's health. We didn't get rid of the Hyde Amendment. There was an opportunity for us to do things like that that ensured that we wouldn't be in this situation now where they're rolling back, where we've lost Roe v. Wade. We could have bolstered that at that time. We needed richer subsidies from day one. It was already lean, and many of the products that are on the market are better than nothing, but not the same as good. And I think the third thing is we needed to have fought for a public option. At the time, while no Republicans ended up voting for the bill to begin with, and so, that's the legislative branch, we should have fought for that. If you're not going to get any Republican votes, why not create a better bill, one that has a public option? which is one of the many ways. I mean, I think our healthcare system ought to be under the umbrella of democracy, and a public option is the first step in that process. Those are three things that I wish we had done differently.
So can you talk a little bit about why the strategy was focused on health insurance options rather than access to healthcare? You can pick your plan, and a lot is made of that with the exchanges, et cetera, but you can't always choose or access care.
Well, I think it's important to clarify that I was in the executive branch, not in the legislative branch, so I was not a part of that conversation. But I can think back to that experience and what I was reading at the time. And my understanding was at the time, there was so many concerns about how poor insurance was. There were specific issues that needed to get resolved. One was lifetime caps. People would be in the middle of therapy, reach their lifetime cap, and lose their insurance in the middle of a transplant or cancer treatment. Like they wanted to solve that. They wanted to make it so that young people who were out in the world and healthy but still needed insurance because they get in car accidents and things happen, could remain in their parents' homes or under their parents' umbrella of insurance. But some of the most draconian things were um, pre-existing conditions meant that you couldn't get health care. And that had a big issue around for folks who had childhood cancers or had elevated blood pressure, and then would move jobs and end up in a different insurance plan. And all of a sudden, ongoing treatment would no longer be covered.
Mhm.
There were so many insurance abuses at the time, we almost forget about it. Those were the things that had a higher priority than coverage for all. And also, if you think back to that time, the conversation was this is the start, not the beginning, not the end. Let's do these things and we can build on it over time. And I think that at the time, again, I was not in government when this passed. I got there in August when it started in March. I did the regulations that came out of the Affordable Care Act. But at the time, there was the belief that there'll be a long-term Democratic leadership that will allow for us to build on this plan over time to make it better and better and better, and as opposed to getting it all at once. And I think that what we've seen is it's been pecked at by the Supreme Court, it's been pecked at by subsequent Congresses, and instead of getting better, it's gotten worse.
What about you talk about a single payer Medicare for all.
Yeah.
What first of all, you talked about the public option with the ACA rollout, and how that was sort of the first step towards a public option. What basically you Medicare for all is a pillar of your platform. Why is that the ideal way to sort of get out of our Byzantine healthcare provision system as opposed to a public option? Just a public option amongst what we have now.
I'm a true believer, right? I'm somebody who has seen more death than anybody should.
Mm.
I have held the hands of people who left the house that day on a normal day and whose lives are changed. And what that has taught me is to be very humble about the fact of my own knowledge and the idea that we're going to be here for a long time. We're not. We only get out of this one way. We are all going to be vulnerable, hurt, and afraid when that comes. And in my day job, my job is to not tell them that things are going to be okay because we don't know, but to promise that I will be with them throughout that journey and fight for them.
Mhm.
I've taken that to every facet of healthcare with the thought that we can fix it here. We can fix it in government. We can fix it through the implementation. And what I've learned is that there is no clean side of this. All of it is beholden to structures of profit that extend well beyond any individual. There will be no hero. There will not be a single swipe. Like we won't be able to just fix insurance and make it all go away. because the real people who are making profit in healthcare are in drugs and devices. We won't just be able to fix drugs and devices because healthcare providers, the large hospital systems, many of them, whether for profit or not, are following these same rules of profit. And so I'm of the mindset that it's time to stop hating the players and hate the game. Like we need fundamental transformation. And that starts with reshaping entirely how we pay for healthcare. A public option would have been a nice first start then because it would be so efficient. It would have ended job lock. And over time, it would have expanded in such a way that we would have gotten there almost on its own. But I'm interested in creating the kind of transformational change, which in fact is probably something that will need something better than Medicare for all when it comes right down to it. I think it's easy to describe Medicare for all because people kind of understand what that means, but Medicare is not that great. There's a high deductible, there's a lifetime cap, it doesn't pay for glasses or hearing aids, it doesn't pay for nursing homes. Like when I say Medicare for all, what I'm describing is a democratically adjudicated system that covers everybody and does so in ways that we really haven't seen before. To get there is not because there will be a single individual who has the heroic capacity to transform the entire healthcare system, but it will be because they've created a pipeline of people who are willing to fight for it for decades, right? We have built a significant amount of momentum around this issue over the decades. I would say 5 years ago, nobody would be willing to speak about it. Now it is a part of the common lexicon. The next step will be describing what, in fact, we actually need, given some of the details around some of these issues, and creating the sort of generational movement that allows for us to get there when we have those openings. Now, we may have one of those openings in the next couple of years. They're destroying so much of our healthcare system that it's in those times where you actually see real change. It's not when things are limping along, it's when things get really bad. But the
Right.
challenge is when things get really bad, people die.
Right.
Take care of those people. They're in my dreams, they're in my book, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when we're ready for transformation, we need the sorts of leaders for whom it's not a slogan, right? It is morally clear what needs to be done, and that's why I'm running.
I think Medicare Advantage plans too, do you view that as part of the problem in the profit driven? Would that be something you would work to eliminate, remove from the equation, privatization?
I think it's also I am Medicare Advantage plans do not demonstrate reduced costs or improved quality. But what they do is give seniors who are on fixed income a sense of financial security. Because traditional Medicare has a high deductible and copays, most people buy Medicare supplementary plans to kind of cover all of that gap. You got to have enough money to do that. Medicare is expensive. Most people who aren't on Medicare don't fully appreciate that.
Mhm.
Seniors who are on a fixed income know it's expensive, and Medicare Advantage says, look, you just pay a small amount every month, we'll cover everything. But what they don't tell them is once you need care, there's a catch. What we really need to do is make seniors' lives more stable. And we really need to make Medicare, traditional Medicare, the one that's under our democratic process, much more effective. And also get rid of Medicare Advantage. Because if we just do one without really getting at the root of the problem and really looking at what the root of the problem is, we haven't solved anybody's life issues.
Mhm.
And that's really what's at stake. Like our policies, the way we measure their success should be in the length of quality of our lives. What matters more than that? And if we're not doing that, we have failed policies. And if
Right.
we're not even willing to understand how our policies actually lead to that outcome, we're not prepared to succeed.
Okay. Great. Interesting. Thank you.
I'm sorry for getting into the weeds, but
I
I'm a
appreciate
healthcare guy.
that. That's your wheelhouse. So this is great. On sort of a different note, you've written about the moral injury that comes from being unable to get patients what they need in a very broken system. Do you ever think about whether serving in Congress, which is a famously labyrinthine and fractious sometimes institution, might engender that same feeling of helplessness and burnout? And then how would you counter that to keep moving forward?
Man, that's a great question. Um, I suspect that anyone who is trying to serve will feel frustrated.
Mhm.
I think that the service of others is inherently challenging because you care about something that's bigger than a system, and you'll find obstacles that are system-based in your way, no matter what. And I think that there will probably be some things in common between Congress and the emergency department. One, making high stakes decisions with regularity. Two, herding cats. I mean, um, the waiting room and the patients in an emergency department are unfiltered. And I suspect, and what I'm seeing from Congress is similarly unfiltered, and so is the noise around it. I think the difference in the moral injury is that in my day job, people actually die. And in Congress, you're just talking. It's not the same, right? The stakes are high. The stakes are high, and it's worth ensuring that you're working with all pace and alacrity in order to have the meaningful impact in the lives of your constituents around the country.
Mhm.
But on a day-to-day basis, nobody dies, right?
Right.
And so you really do have to bring perspective into the difficulty of the work. And I also want to be clear, like, I don't think I'm a hero. I don't think any of us are trying to be heroes. No one person is going to fix this. This is work that's generations long that my grandparents were hoping to see fixed, that their grandparents who were held in bondage were hoping to see improved. I'm raising my hand to be part of the move of people who are fighting to make things better, to honor my patients, to honor my community, to honor my ancestors in that work. And those are the things that keep me encouraged, that keep me energized, that sort of solve the moral injury. Um, because otherwise you roll up in a ball and just accept it. And
Right.
I can't do that.
Yeah, thank you. That's thoughtful. Um, All right, I have one more of our questions, and I have plenty more, but I think after this we can open it up. I can personally attest to hearing a lot of people despair over the last few weeks over the possible six-way ticket split we could get amongst the progressive and grassroots candidates in this district. Um, do you see this as a problem as well? And if not, would you mind explaining why not?
I I do see it as a problem, to be honest. Look, I want to be morally correct and clear, and I also want to win. Like, it's not enough to know the right answer if you can't make the right answer happen in the world. When I was a young attending, I was doing all this research on building community medical center partnerships, and I worked with Southwest Youth Collaborative and Iman and Magic, and we were using community resources to solve the problems in people's lives that led them to me in the emergency department. And then the economy crashed, and the university where I worked was worried about their bond rating with so many uninsured people coming to the hospital. And I remember saying, wait, if we do some of these changes you're describing, here's going to be the outcome on people's lives. And we shouldn't do that. Here's all the literature. We've got to blah, 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 blah. And they were like, that's great. That's terrible. But we do have to do these things. And like the right answer just is irrelevant if you're not going to actually fight to make it happen, right? If all of us progressives and grassroots folks, people who are standing on the side of the folks who are disadvantaged and are willing to stand up for moral issues, are saying all the right things and none of us win, then we end up with more of the same. And if there's an opportunity for us to come together to ensure one of us wins, then I think that that leads us into a better situation. Like if I go back to that situation in 08, 09, when I was a junior faculty, we organized and said, you can't do these things because it'll hurt our patients. And we stuck together and pushed, and we ended up undoing most of that stuff. And I think that there's strength in community. Everybody know. I think nobody on this phone call will be surprised by that. And I think that that probably extends to identifying how we as candidates can ensure that somebody wins and goes to DC and has this conversation on our behalf.
Okay. So do you see any value in a talented candidate with small grassroots support dropping out to rally behind someone more established?
There are a lot of ways to solve it. I mean, I think it should probably be some sort of collective decision, but I don't know if that could happen from the candidates. It would probably need to be many of the progressive groups coming together and having like who are the most like the person would have to be actually viable. Like who can actually win?
Yeah.
Because if you can't actually win, then what do we do here, right? I think it is important to run a certain way. One should not run and take money from just anywhere, for example, or compromise any values, because then when you get there, you're not actually representing the values that you espouse. But if you have all the right values and you don't win, and somebody whose values we disagree with does win, I worry about our future.
Yeah. So organizing
Yeah.
is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. Well, those are our, would you be willing to, there's a question here. Would you be willing to sit in a room with the 6 candidates, say, and to pick someone to rally behind?
I mean, obviously, I think I should be the one who should be rallied behind. I mean, of course, I would sit in that room. I think that I have a clear path to victory. I think the polls that both I and my competitors have confirmed that. I have the resources required to succeed. I'm ready on day one to lead on the most salient issue of this campaign, which is healthcare, and have significant experience around many of the other important issues in this district. So I would love that. I'd love to have that conversation. I suspect that when you talk to all of the other candidates, they'll say something similarly compelling about their own candidacy as well. None of us would be in this race if we didn't think we had an opportunity. But, that's why I think it ultimately will come down to one, it's good to have choices. Maybe it shouldn't be that everybody should run or everybody should leave either. But I do think that it is an opportunity to ensure that somebody who has aligned values ultimately crosses the finish line in first.
Yeah. Thank you. We can at this point, I think, open up to any audience questions. Anyone have anything they'd like to ask?
I'm going to just hop in real quick. So people are welcome to raise hands on here, and we can. The way that'll work is you'll have to be ready to unmute yourself. Oh, actually, no. Sorry, I turned that setting off. So you can raise hands. There have been a couple questions that have come in. So if you have a question in the chat, right, that'll go to me. I'm actually the only one you can chat with currently, Eric, and then I will pass that tomorrow. So I am going to pass her a question, and then we can start prioritizing other questions coming in.
Okay. Question about where you stand on reproductive rights. And I actually had another question on this as well, about well, you can sort of answer for yourself, first off the bat. Where do you stand on reproductive rights?
I'm a staunch supporter of a woman's right to choose. I think it is, look, I take care of all kinds of complicated reproduction issues in the emergency department. I know how fraught people's lives are, and their capacity to guide their own lives, I think, is very important when it comes to their healthcare choices. I think it is shocking and terrifying that if a woman in New Orleans needs to terminate a pregnancy, the closest state to come to is Illinois. Shocking. And I also recognize that the position that I take is not going out on a limb. Like one would think that being, that supporting a woman's right to choose and recognizing the centrality of reproductive care in healthcare is unusual, given that it's in many states illegal. That is the prevailing perspective in the United States. It just simply isn't reflected in our democracy because of other structural issues. So, strong supporter. If I have the opportunity to pass a law that codifies what was once Roe, I will.
Great. How would you use your authority as a physician to fight back against misinformation in the House regarding reproductive care?
Yeah. Ooh, I cannot wait. I think that is an opportunity for things like hearings. And so, having been a part of a number of hearings when I was a White House fellow, I recognize that they're theater, largely for the public. But the opportunity to nail down folks who are promulgating misinformation, half truths, and untruths
Mhm.
in a setting like that is very important. And I relish that opportunity. I cannot wait to sit across from RFK Jr. I think that it is also the kind of platform that who is a congressperson can use to proactively describe important policy options and medical truths and elevate experts who are not in government to speak those ways. Over the past year or so, every couple of weeks, I go on WVON to talk about healthcare issues to the WVON readership with listenership, which is largely South and West Side Black folks. We talk about vaccines. We talk about um, nutrition. We talk about all kinds of things because I think it is important, not just for a public servant, but for physician experts to communicate about issues that have impact in people's lives. And I think that with an even higher platform, I would do that with regularity. And I think that this seat in particular makes it possible because it's so safe. You don't have to tiptoe around and worry about offending this person or that person and um, getting voted out. You can actually just speak with a full-throated voice.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. It does sound very gratifying, very freeing.
Yeah,
So,
the truth
yeah.
is that way.
I have a question from the chat. Many people are tired of Democrats who let Republicans in Congress steamroll them, obliterate norms, and flagrantly violate policies to achieve their own agenda, i.e. Mitch McConnell stonewalling the Obama appointment to the SCOTUS because it was close to the election. How would you counter such tactics, and are you willing to engage in some hardball tactics in order to overcome Republican opposition, since traditional negotiation is no longer a viable approach?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the House has actually been a little bit better than the Senate around this. There was a government shutdown earlier this year in order to try to restore Affordable Care Act subsidies and Medicaid. I think it was just Affordable Care Act subsidies. Fact check me on that, but I think it was just Affordable Care subsidies. And the House Democrats stood together firmly and did not budge. But it was the Senate that folded, and we ended up reopening government without getting any of the things that we wanted. We have another shutdown right now around DHS. The House tends to be holding together a little more clearly. And so, look, I think it is important. Again, this is where moral leadership comes in. What is the point? Right now, we have a government that does not provide SNAP benefits or Medicaid. If you're not feeding the poor, feeding the hungry, and giving medicine to the sick, what's the point of government? And if you're not willing to stand up for those sorts of things, you kind of need to go home. And so I think that that means being willing to stand strong on these issues. And again, because I work in a place where people actually die, it's a little hard talk and some tough tactics doesn't seem that hard to me.
Yeah.
So, like, again, it does matter how you get things done, right? You can't just take money from anywhere. You can't just take any tactics because you can end up in a place where you get what you wanted, but you can't keep it. I use an analogy regularly, like there are a lot of ways to get a shirt, for example. You can knit that shirt. You can buy the shirt. You can steal the shirt. You all end up with the shirt. But if you steal that shirt, your likelihood of keeping it, which was your goal, is a lot lower. So I'm not willing to do just anything. But that comes from being clear on what the goal is.
Okay. Yeah.
This is Eric. I'm gonna hop in real quick because I submitted a couple other questions to Mara. A follow-up to that, while you wouldn't be elected to the Senate, would you publicly support Leader Schumer, or would you be quiet on that issue if asked about it? Or would you be publicly um, a vote of no confidence?
This sounds like a question about my perspective of Democratic leadership, because no matter what I said, it has absolutely no impact on what happens to Leader Schumer, right? Not only am I not pursuing the Senate, in the House, you can't do anything about it. I have not been impressed by his leadership. If I had the vote, I wouldn't support it. But And so that's really more of an expression of my perspective of what Democratic leadership ought to pursue. I was very disappointed in the way that they participated in the most recent shutdowns, because what was the point in shutting down the government if you weren't really going to push for what you wanted and you had the ability to get it? That's not the kind of leadership. I think we need different kinds of leadership. I also think that that question is almost pointless, because the leadership won't change until we change it, right? There's a component of this where, if you look back to Obama's win in '08, Republicans were in disarray. They're like, what are we going to do? I can't believe it. What are the Republicans going to do? Blah, blah, blah. Republicans didn't do anything. Trump was elected, and then Trump changed the Republicans. I think we're in a very similar situation here, where there are a lot of Democrats wringing their hands about how are we going to get the Democrats to do something different. They're not going to do anything different. We're going to elect different Democrats, and the Democrats will be different. And until that happens, like, many of these other intermediate steps are important to think about, but like, we just need to elect different people, different kinds of people who have different goals and different experiences, who are like, I might even be too old, and I'm not even old, but like, we need generational change.
Okay, thank you. Next question I have from the chat is, what issue have you not been asked about tonight that you feel should be getting more attention? And what are the top 3 changes you will fight to enact to address it?
You address that question, the one that hasn't been asked about, but I care deeply about. Hmm. That is a great question. Let's see. I've talked about housing. I've talked about um I think education is probably worth tackling
Okay.
for a lot of reasons. One is, it can be such a leveling and it's so critical to our democracy for the population to have shared knowledge and opportunity to grow and thrive. And I think, for one, we need a large inflow of federal dollars so that we can decouple real estate tax revenue from the schools. I mean, that leaves Chicago public schools always at a disadvantage, certain schools even worse. It's a real challenge. And we won't be able to fix this at a state or local level. Two, we need to restore the Department of Education. If your child needs help, they won't get it without improving things like, Title IX, ADA, all of these things where students who need educational supports, that's federally funded and it's federally enforced. So many kids need support and need to go to a public school to get that support. We need those resources back, and we need them to flourish. And the third thing that comes from the Department of Education is, we are seeing currently book burning, where the Department of Education is dictating what can and cannot be taught. Some of that is the success of so many of the contemporary authors like Nicole Hannah-Jones and Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ibram X. Kendi, who have reshaped our understanding of this country's history towards one that is more fulsome and accurate. It's also threatening. Department of Education should not be in the business of book burning and telling folks what can and cannot be taught. And I think that there's a legislative process that should fix that.
What's the legislative process?
For one, you can tether funding. First of all, we need to restore, right? So there's some protections that need to be put in place, but then also many of our funding decisions at the legislative level leave far too many openings without specific language. There need to be language like shall and by certain dates to ensure that things do happen and that there's a time frame. That's the law and no longer up to regulatory vagaries, which then get taken advantage by presidents like this to just not do it or do it in a way that could be easily misinterpreted.
All right. So something from the chat here. You are one of my top choice candidates. So many candidates in general have idealistic platforms and then are not able to deliver or change course on their campaign promises once in office. As someone whose work experience who so far has been mostly outside of public office, how do you plan to address the potentially steep learning curve as a new civil servant? Do you have any plans for how to follow through on campaign promises?
Oh, this is wonderful. I love this because the point is to get the stuff done, right?
Mhm.
I think it's important to point out that I have gone from sector to sector throughout my career. I started out as an active, I'm a physician, right? I had to learn how to be a doctor. I started out as an academic, so I was doing research and publishing papers. Then I went to government and had to learn the culture, the way work gets done, the standard of evidence to get that executed. I moved to the private sector to implement the Affordable Care Act, a similar learning and growth curve. I expect there to be one in government as well, where it requires a level of humility to recognize that you don't know everything. None of us do. That there are smart, hardworking people everywhere you go, even if you might disagree with them, but you can learn how that culture works and go up that growth curve relatively quickly so that it allows for you to use the tools of that particular environment in order to implement the changes and plans that are required. Also, this seat provides another opportunity to implement. This is a unique seat. It is the sixth most blue seat in the country, which means the holder of this seat can use its platform not just to speak clearly, but to exercise power, which means supporting those seats that are more likely to swing, right? Those +5 seats, +4 seats, where people can't speak as vociferously about some of these issues, can't pound their fists, and also need probably some financial backing to help them. Whoever gets this seat won't have to fundraise every other year for their own reelection, but somebody could fundraise to protect these other vulnerable seats, which actually makes the leader in Illinois 7 someone that could actually hold the influence of multiple seats because you've helped them and they can help you drive agendas forward. So learning the organizational cues and vagaries in DC, using the power of the seat, and then also creating a competent constituent services platform here in the district with 3 offices where with virtual and in-person hearings where you can hear from people in the district, allow for you to both speak clearly about what's actually happening in your district, know clearly how to get things done in Congress, and have the backing of other Congress people in order to implement an agenda. I think those are the 3 ways I intend to get stuff done. I also don't intend to have this seat forever, right? I think that one of the temptations of having a very safe seat is, well, I'll just kick the can down the road. I can be here for 25 years. We'll find the right time. I think that is not the approach that I'll take. I think it's important to run hard, get things done 10 years, maybe 12 if you're in a position of leadership, and hand it off to the next generation. I think what we found is on the Democratic side, those seats that have demonstrated the most power and effectiveness to succeed have been people who know how to get things done and are committed, who come from safe seats. I didn't mean to do that. Um, but like Steny Hoyer comes from a seat this blue, Hakeem Jeffrey comes from a seat this blue, Nancy Pelosi came from a seat this blue, and those were their playbooks. That's how they got there. That's how they got stuff done.
Ah, that's great. That's so much to think about. That's great. Um, sticking back to Medicaid unwinding, back to the budgetary cuts and the loss of the loss of subsidies that are leading to loss of coverage for a lot of people. Medicaid unwinding, with millions losing Medicaid coverage recently, have you seen a spike in uninsured patients presenting to the ER? And what would be your immediate legislative fix for those who fell off, just to get them covered and back
Yeah.
into care?
So let's talk about the reason this cut is so cruel, so vile, is that the only way you actually save money is if people who need care don't get it.
Mm.
You literally have to keep people off of insurance and so that the care that they need, they don't get. I, to be fair and honest, have no idea the insurance status of the people I take care of. None. I do not know if they're insured or not. Not only because I don't look, but because we don't even establish their insurance status until after they've received care. There's the Emergency Medical and Active Labor Treatment Act, EMTALA, that says that if you present to an emergency department anywhere in this country, you have to get cared for without regard for their ability to pay. And so we do that.
Mhm.
When they're getting discharged or admitted is when we understand their insurance status, and that I'm already done with my care by then. So I have no idea who people, the insurance status of the people that I work for. But I will say I sit on the board of the MLK Medical Center in Los Angeles. It's a safety net hospital, a little bit like Mount Sinai, except many more people who are undocumented. It's about 60% Medicaid,
Mhm.
about 20% Medicare, and the rest are like um, insured. It's a very small amount, but many in California, like Illinois, many of the people who are not documented get covered under Medicaid. That was cut first. We've already had to close a clinic because we don't have the financial capacity to keep it open, and that's in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
The impact of this law is here. It is going to lead to safety net closures. It's going to lead to people who need care not getting it. And if you don't go to a safety net hospital, it will still affect you because once those places close, people go somewhere. They're going to go to the hospital where you are. Everything is going to be more crowded and quality of care is going to go down everywhere. That budget edit is just a budget. Like Congress will pass a new budget every year. You can restore those funds quickly, which is that's just stopping the bleeding. Like I'm an ER doc, you just stop the bleeding. Then that allows you the opportunity to preserve some, resolve some of the suffering, but that leads to the opportunity to now recognize that how precarious our programs are. The systems are broken. Everybody is hurt. So that we can drive towards this new demo, this a Medicare for all solution.
When Illinois' health benefits for immigrant adults program ended last summer to the state budgetary constraints, 30,000 of our community members lost coverage very abruptly and became a new class of uninsured folks. Do you believe everyone should have access to care regardless of their immigration status?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I believe we have a shared humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Either we are all one or we are not. There aren't exceptions to that. And when you are sick and injured, you should be cared for. The reason I chose to work in an emergency department is because that's the only place in the healthcare system where everybody can receive care without regard for the ability to pay. I am thankful that I don't know people's insurance status. I don't know their documentation status. I just take care of people. Because at the bottom of it all, we have a shared humanity. When you see people who are laid bare by illness or injury, who have been stripped of their social and cultural trappings of wealth or poverty, they're just people. And in exactly the same way, it is one of the benefits of, it's one of the most privileged parts of being a caregiver. My colleagues see this, the nurses I work with, is being with people and being, it takes, it clarifies what's really at stake. It's one of the reasons why, like when we use terms like genocide, it almost makes it more nebulous when what is actually happening is such an assault on our humanity that reducing it to will you say this word or not is almost like, why are we bickering about something that has stakes that are so high when we actually need to stop what's going on in these places? When we actually are saying, well, we're not going to cover these people because they're not documented. It's like people. We're talking about people.
Mhm.
That's you. That's me. And it reminds me of some of the issues with our founding, where we held my ancestors as property for hundreds of years. Like we have this lexicon in our society that comes from way back when, where if you strip it away, we are all one. And our policies need to reflect that, particularly when we're sick and injured.
Yeah. Great. All right, thank you for that. Um, so another follow-up is ICE with the Department of Homeland Security. Is that an can it be reformed or does it need to go away? Does it need to be abolished?
I think you have to abolish that.
Mhm.
Let me first say it is clearly a function of government to enforce borders um, and that has always been the case. Like there's always been a component of our government that did that. But this organization has a particular culture that is now broken, where you've had masked men dressed up like they're going to war, rounding up our neighbors and terrorizing communities across the country that have been given quotas around the number of people they need to round up. That has fueled a massive expansion where they've gotten a 29, I think it's 29 billion extra dollars in order to do this work. Like you can't just simply retrain people or retrain an organization that has done these things. And the public would never trust that it would work. You need to this needs to be abolished. We have to start over. This has to be undone. And there needs to be accountability around this. Like the people who have broken laws need to go to jail. Like we have to be a country of laws. We need to have the sort of hearings that make clear what has happened and how it happened so it can't happen again. The people who, many of the folks who have done some of the most abhorrent but not illegal things need to be kept from being police officers when they are disbanded. Like we need real accountability around this because while they're rounding up people who are may not speak English or may have come here recently, this is the kind of thing that expands to you and me and is already affecting our lives. Like this is not something we can ignore.
Yeah, right here in our district at the Broadview Detention Facility. What are some things that you would do to demand that accountability and justice for the horrors that took place that are taking place there right now?
Yeah, no, I think that is the role of Congress. Like, I would love to see that Broadview Detention Center sold to the city of Broadview for $1. That thing needs to be closed.
Mhm.
Congress can be the ones that can actually are the ones that hold the hearings that ensure that that the executive branch that implements these policies is held to account. That is the role of Congress. That is the co-equal branch that does that work. That's what they do. Um, and so it's just a matter of actually executing that work and having that followed all the way through. I think back to January 6th, Congress did a great job with the January 6th hearings and the documents that ensued, but none of the changes were implemented in the executive branch that were requested and demanded. And because there was, a Democratic House, and they didn't actually demand that that work happen, but that goes back to moral leadership. What are you here to do? What's the point?
Mhm.
You take that the final steps forward. Merrick Garland should have followed on that work and issued the indictments and the arrests that were required.
Um,
He did arrest a whole lot of people, and people were sent to jail. Many of them were pardoned, but you follow the steps all the way through.
Right. All right. Thank you. I have a note here from Eric about answering some questions from the audience live. Right? Oh.
That is correct. So, Jane?
Hello,
Yep, there
my
you
name
are.
is Jane Gilder. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the, oh, sorry. Appreciate the time that you've put in and the conversation. While I support many of the progressive points that you've made, and I've worked in the field, I want to know what your approach is to building coalition in the Congress, even if that means across the aisle, because otherwise we will continue to be stalled and deteriorate.
Yeah, it's a good question because oftentimes there are unlikely partners to getting things done. I think it's important to start by saying I don't know the politics of many of the nurses and doctors and pharmacists that I work with, but we work together all the time to get things done. We have shared goals. We have far more in common than we disagree with, and I suspect that that's the case in almost every room we are all in. One of the ways that I think we can start is there is now a Democratic Doctors Caucus. It hasn't, we have not had a lot of Democratic doctors. Now there are a few, and there are a handful of us running across the country right now. I hope that many of us win. I hope all of us win. Add to the Democratic Doctors Caucus. That then can lead, there's already a Republican Doctors Caucus. While we may disagree on a lot of things, we have a lot of shared experiences and understanding that come from being by the bedside, which is the sort of kernel that you can start to build the sort of bridges that allow for constructive long-term building. You can solve problems when you have that kind of shared experience. I think what's important is not will you negotiate, is what won't you negotiate, right? And I think that's why I worry sometimes when Democrats run for Congress or Senate or wherever, like they've written a grant proposal and say it's going to be all of these things. Because when you actually are trying to get something done, whether it's in your family or in a business or in legislation, you never get everything that you want. Like that's just not what life is. And so having clarity about what are the non-negotiables, like I will never negotiate away my neighbors. I will never compromise or debate the humanity of other people. I will, I am very staunchly against increasing suffering. I stand with folks who are oppressed. Like when you have those sorts of non-negotiables and you know what those North Stars are, like there are actually a lot of ways to solve for a universal healthcare plan, particularly once you recognize that Medicare itself is imperfect and needs to be improved. So if you go into the room saying, look, our goal here is to make sure we have a democratically adjudicated coverage for everybody, like there probably, you could go on many of these wonk pages and find 10 different ways, and then you start the conversation from there with people who you might not fully agree with. I also think it's important to recognize that Democrats don't agree on a lot of things. And if we did, we probably would have gotten a lot more done. And so much of the negotiation is not just across the aisle, but it's within party to find sort of consensus to get things done. And that one involves some of the things that I described earlier about how important this seat could be with the kind of leader that knows how to harness power and deliver excellence. And can work both internally and across the aisle to get these things done.
Eric, I can't see. Is there someone else?
I don't,
Oh.
in terms of audience questions, no, sorry, I was just working the
I'm trying to
chat. No,
see.
nobody else's hand is up. We're good.
Okay. All right. Democrats have a lot of solutions to the affordability crisis that take a long time to have an effect. What do you think about something really strong that would have immediate effects? Maybe not all good, like a cap on the percentage over the purchase price a home can be sold for within 10 years of being purchased. All right, my cadence on that question was, did that make sense?
Was that cap one of the things that would immediately change things, or as an example of something that would not? Because most homes aren't repurchased.
Right. What do you think about something really strong that would have immediate effects? Maybe not all good, like a cap on the percentage over the purchase price a home could be sold for within 10 years of being purchased.
I mean, I think the most immediate thing that will bring down prices is rationalizing our tariffs. Like that is one of the leading drivers and is in control of Congress. That could happen really quickly. Um, I think another thing is we saw the Power Act downstate Illinois is in Springfield. They're trying to pass an act that ensures that um, AI companies are responsible for the environmental um, and electrical resources that they require. One of the reasons we've seen such high costs of people's electric bills is they're competing for electricity with AI servers that are massive and require a lot of energy. Putting something like that in place on a federal level, I think would provide people a lot of relief relatively quickly. I'm hopeful that this pass at the state level. It's really a stroke of, smart policy that we could do more broadly. Um, and that would trickle down into people's pockets really quickly. I also think we should look at the poverty alleviating power of direct payments to people. We do a lot of earned income tax credits that helps, and you can bolster that. But during the pandemic, we relieved more poverty by simply giving people checks than with any other program that we've done. And I would love to see some solutions like that. That does not reduce costs, and in fact can be somewhat inflationary because you've induced some demand. But for the people who get it, it changes their lives. And it did during the pandemic, and I'd love to see some of that again.
Eric, anything else? Anything? Anyone else? Feel free.
Yeah, hold on. Oh,
That's
we have
it.
another
Okay.
one now.
Do
Yep,
you?
I think people are. Oh, that isn't a question, unfortunately. You can feel free to go to the question bank if
Mhm.
you had anything you've,
Yeah,
been thinking of, Mara.
sure, sure. Um, well, I have a question. In your book, you write often very, very thoughtful letters to patients, to colleagues and family members about who have experienced frustration or suffering in the ED and emergency department.
Yeah.
Many of these are turn into they express solidarity, but they also turn into expository essays describing historical or policy context. If you were writing a letter to the voters of the seventh district right now, what's the one thing you would want to convey to them about the state of the district, the state of the country, um, from that perspective?
Uh, I've learned so much during this campaign. I mean, I think honestly, the worst part of the campaign is I have to do more talking than listening.
Mm.
But to the extent that I have an opportunity to hear from people and where they can share what their challenges are and what they're facing, I have gotten an incredibly rich understanding of how affordability affects people's lives, how transportation affects people's lives, how housing is an incredible challenge. Um, West Garfield Park just saw more than a 100% increase in their property taxes. Lawndale was more than 90%. Inglewood, it was more than 80%. Meanwhile, they went down in Lincoln Park. Like these sorts of inequities around the cost and the experience with government have been not surprising, but pervasive. I think I would write a letter up to the district about not only why that happened, that it is happening, and that I see you in solidarity, but the role of our electoral process in potentially fixing it. One of the most educational components of this is that political insiders are really difficult, are not trying to change things very much. Um, Some of that has to do with the way money flows in politics. The fact is, in order to get a message out, like you need to spend money to do it, or time, really both. Even social media means spending time getting that up and out. Getting flyers and push cards is not free. Posting things on the sign, on streets is expensive. Digital is expensive. The capacity to do that favors those who are already political insiders. And being a political insider means you've already been invested in a status quo. So the capacity for people on the outside to disrupt that is the bar is so much higher. And it also helps me understand why people are willing to take money that has strings attached to it. Because it is so difficult to raise money, particularly if you're not a political insider. It is so difficult to get a slew of people who are willing to endorse you unless you've already been in the machine for decades. And I didn't mean to do that, but if you're in those machines and you are one of those insiders, it is that much harder for you to be that force of saying, like, no, this whole thing is broken because you've been a part of it. And I think until we get something like like really significant, both ranked choice voting and campaign finance reform, it's going to be hard for us to get the kind of leaders that we want and need. Oh, and by the way, pretend like you want to run as an independent because you don't want to be a part of the Democrats and Republicans. The number of signatures that you would need to get on the ballot would require an enterprise that almost no independent could actually muster. Those of us who are pursuing public service and not politics, those of us who are not political insiders, we are fighting a very uphill battle in order to both maintain the clarity on what's at stake and also succeed in a campaign. I've just been incredibly fortunate that like the House of Medicine has been like doctors, nurses, or medicine, like healthcare has been supporting me in such a way that it's allowed for me to be as effective as I have been. But it is an uphill battle. It's worth it. I actually think this has been one of the most compelling experiences of my life. And in fact, I fully recommend it. It's been fun to go up this learning curve and learn about not just how do you run a first-class campaign, a professional campaign, but learn about the district. Learn about neighborhoods that I've spent a little time in, but don't know in depth, and now know in a lot of depth, and recognize that this is a tale of at least 2 cities and maybe like 10 cities. This district is so diverse and complicated. Like even Inglewood and West Garfield Park rhyme, but they're not the same. They have issues that are both the legacies of segregation and institutional racism, but it's not the same. It's just really compelling and interesting. And I am excited to be poised and in a very competitive position in this race where I can actually win.
What's something that you've learned about a community that you weren't as familiar with before this experience?
Mhm. Austin has a number of incredible health assets that I was not familiar with. The amount of work that they're doing on food and nutrition, the way Westside United and Aisha Jaco are driving agendas, collaborating with Erie community. Like I kind of knew all of these people and pieces, but they're coming together to try to build something that's greater than the sum of its parts. I didn't know that. I didn't have proximity to that. And I also didn't understand how much the community was supporting them and blowing wind into they weren't people coming in from the outside like we're going to do this. This was a collaborative process that came together to create something incredible.
Austin. I have a question from the chat. Have you heard the news that the DOJ confirmed transfer of the Social Security Administration database to an unsecured Cloudflare server? What oversight do you believe needs to be done for unauthorized access to our Social Security numbers? And if that information was illegally given to a company like Palantir?
I had not heard. It's disappointing and not surprising. I worry that, I mean, once you lose your identity in that way, it's difficult to return. And this is how you get this sort of mass surveillance that undermines our First Amendment rights. I mean, this again, there's so many of these rules and laws that are already in place. They're just not effectively um, enforced. I mean, what is happening with ICE is illegal most of the time. These are violations of our First Amendment rights in a lot of cases. And right now, I've seen so many community groups doing a great job at documenting so that when we have a responsive DOJ and a responsive Attorney General, we'll have the ability to start to course correct. And I think that's a start. I think that if we flip the house and we have strong leaders who understand how these things work, we have the capacity to have the kinds of hearings that both bring it to light and also hold to account and can tether budget lines to ensuring that it can't move forward. That's right now been effective in shutting down DOJ. We hope we can deliver on those outcomes, but it's a model for how you could do some similar things with transferring our data to a cloud. That what I worry about is, once you've released this data, once it's in the cloud, it's how do you get it back? Like there's certain damages that you can't undo. And so I'm hopeful that we both flip the house and get enough people in here that are starting to right some of these wrongs. But I also recognize that a lot of what is happening now, we're going to be digging out of for the rest of my adult life.
Okay. All right, another question from the chat. How do you intend to work in Congress to protect healthcare for both trans youth and trans adults?
Healthcare for trans youth and trans adults is healthcare. I wouldn't see it. I do not think that there should be strings attached that are carve outs like was done with Hyde or anything like that. You incorporate that care in the overall services that are being delivered, which was the case pre-Trump and can be the case post-Trump, particularly when you create the kind of policies that recognize that trans youth and trans adults are people, and we deliver care for them. For us.
Us. Thank you for that. Eric, I see you came back on video.
I was just going to say, we sort of the latest possible time I think we could keep Dr. Fisher is 8:30. That's
Yeah.
in about 7 minutes.
Right.
You've done excellent. I wish there was a mechanism to make your questions have more conceptual proximity to each other, right? I realize some of the questions were kind of, all over the place. You go from current events to
Yeah.
something deep and philosophical that you've been thinking about in the campaign trail. So you've done a great job, and we appreciate it. If there are any more questions, there are a couple coming into the chat, of course. So give me a second here.
Let me also say,
Yeah, go for it.
Please, but also I think this is the job, right? You talk to people, and I don't know everything. I'll answer in the way that I know it. But what I'm trying to demonstrate is some clarity around authenticity. This is who I am, and I can't be somebody else. So
Yeah. I think I think that's oh, okay. All right. We've got a soft question. As a way to take you out. That's perfect.
Lovely.
I mean, to be honest, that's from a plant that's in somebody on our planning committee. So,
Lovely.
but let me get that tomorrow. And I was going to say, I mean, if you have anything else you want to say, I know you've done a lot of talking, but if you have anything else you want to say, we would love to hear it.
No, I find this a great privilege to be in front of you all. in this capacity, I am excited about the final 27 days that we're facing. I am proud of the work that we've done on this campaign to honor the district, honor the legacy of Danny Davis, honor a future that's better than our past. I'm fortunate to have the resources sufficient to run a credible final stretch that could very easily lead. Like, look, we don't get to choose the outcome, the voters do. It's kind of like our lives. We don't choose how we die, we choose how we live. And so I've chosen to run a campaign on issues and on moral clarity and on healthcare and on affordability and on democracy that honor our lives. And so um, I'm hopeful that you guys are appreciative and recognize what I'm trying to do here. And you all have choices around what you'll do next. And I hope I win many of your votes.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you again. And we have one more question from the chat, a soft question. What's your current pop culture obsession?
Ha!
We all have.
I had a chance to consume much pop culture. You know what I'm doing right now is I'm reading Malcolm X. It's not really pop culture, but because my book was published on Penguin Random House, they send me books regularly. I don't get to keep up as I'd like right now because I'm pretty busy, but they sent me the centennial version, or the centennial. They're republishing it for the 100 years since since Malcolm Little was born. Malcolm Little to Malcolm X to El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, with a sprinkling of Detroit Red in there before he became Malcolm X. And I had read it when I was in high school, and I read it again when I was when I was in the middle of my residency. And now that I'm an OG, it is such a different book around the arc of growth, around leadership, um, around, being in the moment and understanding what is happening, and also the recognition of redemption. Like, in that book, Malcolm X is redeemed over and over and over again. He just changes and becomes a better version of himself multiple times over the course of this book in ways that I'm not sure that might be what I'm projecting on it based on what I've been seeing in this country. But if somebody had given up on Malcolm X when he was Detroit Red, we would have never seen El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. And most importantly, he didn't give up on Detroit Red. It's just a really compelling book. So that's my pop culture obsession. It also means that, like, reading a hard copy book, which is what I prefer, retrains my head away from this like infinite scroll of Twitter or Instagram or email, and allows for me to just sit in focus for a moment. And in a campaign like this, where we're running around doing so many things, even our panels normally are 2 minutes at a time, sitting for a moment with a piece of real literature is just such a gift. And no, it's not pop culture, but that's how I roll right now.
I think that's perfect. I really enjoy that answer. I think that's something to think about, and that's great. It's a good antidote to a lot of what we deal with every day. So appreciate your time so much, Dr. Fisher. This has been great.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Indivisible, you guys rock. Have a good night.
Thank you
so
very much.
much.
All right.
Bye.
Okay. For anybody left on the call, I will be ending it. Thank you very much.